Hi, everyone. I think we'll get started now. So thanks, everyone, for coming today. I just wanted to welcome you to our session this morning. So as you all know, at this stage, coronavirus has changed how people are working, and many people have been forced into working remotely and working from home. So in this session, I'm going to talk to you about not only how do you manage distributed teams, but how do you successfully manage distributed teams. So first, a bit about ourselves. So I'm Stella, I'm Managing Director of Anartech. So Anartech is Ireland's leading and largest Drupal agency. We work with a range of clients from government, corporates, nonprofits, you name it. So I founded the company 12 years ago. I never set out to say, I'm going to set up a distributed company. It kind of happened organically. So first there was myself, and I set up in my home office. And then I brought on a business partner, and he was located on the other side of the country, so 200 kilometers away. And neither of us really fancied moving. So with technology that was open to us, we could just continue working remotely from each other. And it continued to grow organically that way. So as more people came on board, they were located in other parts of Ireland, and we just continued working as a distributed team. After a while, we made a decision that we were going to be distributed by default. So what does that mean? That means every decision we made was, can we continue going with our distributed nature? Does it support that working environment? And at this stage, there's now close to 30 of us working all around Europe. So we have people, we still have a fair number of people in Ireland, but we have people in France, Spain, Croatia, even as far as Lebanon. So when you talk to clients, the usual reaction before coronavirus was, wait, what? And, you know, this has all changed now. I used to get the questions from clients going, hey, how does that work? How do you communicate with your team? How do you manage the project? But with coronavirus, this is becoming more acceptable. It's not so strange. It's the de facto standard. So the questions are coming more about, well, how have you done it so far, and how are you doing it so successfully? So just to go into how we do it and my recommendations and tips for you. First, the most important thing is to trust your team. So one of the questions, as I mentioned earlier, was how do you know that your team are working? How do you know they're actually doing what they say they're going to do? Well, how do you know that they're doing that when they're in the office? You have to trust your team to deliver what you've asked them to deliver. And you'll know whether that's happening or not, because you'll see the output, you'll see whether the work is being done. And to be honest, if you don't trust your team enough to allow them to work from home, then why did you hire them in the first place? If you don't trust them, why did you hire them? So it's very important to set expectations. So they have to understand or know what it is you expect from them. So that's both in terms of deliverables. So, you know, doing certain tasks or meeting a certain project requirement or deadline, but also in how you work together. So do you expect daily updates? Do you expect weekly updates? Do you expect people to communicate via Slack? You have to set all those expectations for them so that they can meet them. If you don't, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You also need to empower your team. So by that, I mean, you have to provide them with the tools and technologies and the environment where they can be successful. So they will need, obviously, they'll need the communication tools, they need the software, but they also need more than that. So it's important when you have a distributed team that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, but also how they communicate together, and also that they don't feel isolated, that they feel supported in what they're doing, and they have the necessary tools, but also the necessary supports from management and their colleagues. At Anartech, we've actually set up a buddy mentor system when you join Anartech, you get assigned a buddy and a mentor. So your buddy is meant to be somebody who introduces you to the team and it makes you feel at home and settled in, whereas your mentor is more on the technical side, perhaps, who be working closely with, who will show you the ropes, and so on. So that's something worth considering. And lastly, you need to communicate, but not just communicate, you need to communicate well. And this point is worth delving into a bit more. So just to do that. First thing you have to do is decide on your communication channels. And it's important that each communication channel has a clear purpose and you know when it should be used and when it shouldn't be used. I would highly recommend that every call be a video call, whether it be in Teams or Zoom or Jiu-Jitsu or whatever it is. Having a video call rather than just a regular conference call or a like picking up the phone, it's really much more powerful. So you get to see their facial expressions, and a lot of communication is through body language, and it really helps build that bond and that level of that level of personality you can see come across. So it really does help build those relationships. It also helps build relationships with clients too. So we would recommend that all calls with clients are also video calls. And in fact, we often have calls with clients where they've turned off their video or they're not set up for video, but we'll still leave our video on, because even though we can't see them, they can see us and they can start building that relationship with us. We also use real-time chats. So we use Rocket Chat, which is an open source tool very similar to Slack. And for that, we have a separate channel for each project. So each project team can have their own channel and talk away for quick things, quick messages or asynchronous communication. It's important that it's not a replacement for video calls. You don't want to have too many calls. There is a balance to be struck, but at the same time, not everything is appropriate for talking about in Rocket or in Slack. Certain things can go on for a while, or you can't get that tone of voice necessarily. So at a certain point in a conversation, you may say, you know, it'd be quicker to solve this if we just jumped on a quick call and had a chat about it. So do keep that in mind. Of course, you have your project management tools as always. So I'm not changing anything there. You still need those. You need that centralized place for project documentation, for issue queues, for conversations about the project itself. And lastly, try to limit the use of email. So it's fine occasionally. I'm not saying get rid of it entirely, but if you're going to share project documentation, then you do it through the project management tool. If you're going to raise an issue, then you should do it through the issue tracking tool. You know, email is far too easy for people to get dropped from the CC list or for different threads to start. Just keep it all in centralized locations. So in terms of managing communication, it's important that you have clear rules of engagement. So like I said just there about email, you wouldn't send project documentation through an email, you'd use the project management tool. Similarly, you wouldn't raise an issue in Rocket, you'd do it in the issue queue. It's important that people understand sort of like a code of conduct, that, you know, what is acceptable and what's not. So it's important to have those rules, even if they don't necessarily have to be written down. There should be an understanding about tone of voice and so on. Also, don't send an email and then ping somebody on Rocket or on Slack 2 minutes later going, hey, did you get my email? Or even worse, don't send somebody an email or a message and then pick up a video call and say, hey, did you get my message? That's just really not right. Every call should have an agenda, and I'm a firm believer in that, even though I think I should probably enforce it a bit more. But every call should have an agenda, and if it doesn't have an agenda, then it should be a well-structured meeting so everyone knows in advance what to expect. So that would be my first rule of thumb for video calls. but also try to schedule them in advance. And I'll come back to that in a bit more detail later. And lastly, allow for context switching. So many people, you've seen it on social media and stuff since coronavirus started, that they're scheduling one call after the other. You wouldn't do that in real life for meetings. You'd allow downtime between meetings and calls. So it's important to allow that time, 15 minutes even, just to allow for context switching, allow for a meeting to run over, allow for people to go get a cup of tea or coffee, comfort break, allow that gap between calls. And this is really where we get into how much communication is too much communication. So it's really important that you communicate, and you communicate well and often with your team. But it's also really important that they have space to disconnect and that they have focused time to actually get work done. And there's various tactics for that. One thing that I like doing is trying to schedule all the calls for the morning or for the afternoon. Generally, I prefer the morning. It doesn't necessarily work that way for everybody, but by scheduling all my calls in the morning, then I have the afternoon free to focus on things I have to get done. I also recommend to people that they block book time in their calendars. So you have focus time then carved out. So in advance for the week, you say, right, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, that's really where I'm going to focus on. And I just put it in my calendar, and people know that I'm not available for meetings, and they won't even request a meeting with me then. I also came across something called Get Clockwise recently. It looks pretty neat. It's a tool, online app, or it's a tool that you can, it optimizes your calendar. So I think it will work really well for internal teams, perhaps, or people who don't have lots of client calls and external meetings, because it takes the calendars of yourself and your teammates, and it optimizes it to move all the meetings closer together, while also creating this focus time that you need to actually get stuff done. Also, don't forget to tell your team that it's okay for them to switch off notifications and to switch off email, to go dark essentially, and say, hey, everybody, I need to focus on this. I'm going to switch off Slack for a while. If you really need to get me, you can get me on this number, or you can get me this way. And so your colleagues know, you're still around if you're needed in an emergency, but you just need to focus on something. Also, don't be afraid to step away if you're not in the zone. There's no point in just banging your head against a problem or banging your head against a wall, not getting anywhere. Take a step back, go for a walk, get some fresh air. Come back later on when you're more able to focus on it and you're more in the zone. And this is where flexible working hours can also really help. So at Anartech, everybody cannot just choose where they work and where they live, but also when they work. So we have some people who come online like at 5 a.m. in the morning, other people who work into the late hours of the evening. And it's up to them. They set their schedule. As long as the work gets done, we don't mind. And that allows them the greatest flexibility to say, hey, I need to step away for a while and go do something else. Or even, I need to go pick up the kids and in the middle of the day, and I'll be back later on. It does provide both that sense of community in a way, like that it's a good place to work, but it's also provides them with that flexibility to work at the time that's best for them. And of course, the thing that's underlies all of that, the flexible working hours and the stepping away if you're not in the zone and the switching off for focus time, is that a lot of communication is asynchronous. Okay, video calls are not asynchronous, but and that's why we try to schedule those in advance. But like Rocket Chat, people shouldn't, or Slack, people shouldn't expect an answer immediately. It's designed to be asynchronous communication, so you can leave a message for somebody and they shouldn't feel the need to respond immediately. They can respond when they're back and looking at Rocket. The other thing that I've seen arise on social media since COVID is the whole, the people are reporting that they're actually working longer hours because they're always on. And I think it's really important that people actually turn off their devices, turn off their email. Don't be checking email later in the evening. If you're finished work for the day, you're finished work for the day, and your staff need to know that that's okay too. So how do you foster a sense of community and a sense of being part of a team when everybody's working remotely and you only see each other on a call once a day, maybe? So at Anartech, we have a Zoom call every single day for 15 minutes, that's all, and it's purely social. It's hey, how are you? You know, talk about the weather, talk about kids, talk about what movie you saw last night, whatever it is. Now, we have started to notice, I will admit, that since we are, 20, 25 people heading that way, it's starting to, we're starting to outgrow it a little bit. It's very hard to have personal conversations when you're in a group as large as that. So what we started experimenting with recently is Zoom breakout rooms. So once a week at the minute, on one of these calls, we are randomly broken out into Zoom rooms of 5 or 6 people. And that does seem to be working quite well, actually. It allows us to get to know people who we're not working directly with, and for everybody to have a chance to talk and communicate and to learn something about somebody else. Sorry, just take a drink of water. So yeah, we do that every day. But we also have social Slack and Rocket channels. So I mentioned earlier that we have our project team channels. We also have topic focused ones for like front-end development or UX or marketing or whatever it is. But as well as that, we have social ones. So we have a chit chat, which is essentially our virtual water cooler, where we can talk about, again, the weather or the dogs, or post pictures and talk about what movie or music we're listening to. We also have a shout out channel, which I think is really important. It's good to say thanks and to celebrate the wins. So celebrate a project going live, but also, say thank you to somebody for helping you debug a particular problem. It's nice to do that and to recognize that. We also have a foodie channel where you can share recipes and pictures of what you're cooking. Coffee home office to share setups or that advice and talk about how you're setting up your home office, exercise and well-being, and there's many more. As a company, we're also very transparent, and it's I think that's really important to make people feel that they're part of something bigger and they're not just working on their work and their project and that's it, that they're part of something bigger than just whatever module they're writing or theme they're creating. So, we give regular updates to the team as to how the company is doing overall, what our strategy is, and we try to be as transparent as possible. We also, so before coronavirus, we would have done 3 or 4 times a year, we'd have done a team retreat where we get everybody together for 2 days in Dublin. Can't really do that so much now, but we have taken them online and we do virtual. We've changed the format a bit. So it's now for an afternoon every month rather than 2 days every quarter. But it is really good to get to know, to meet people. And if you can get people together in person, once we have a vaccine and everything, do try and get people together in real life. It really is worth it to build those bonds. And social activities, of course. Like at the physical team retreats, we would have done a scavenger hunt and taken a cooking class, or done whatever, just to have people to have fun together. Virtually is a little bit different, but we did manage to do virtual escape rooms recently, so that was pretty fun and definitely well worth doing. And as you can see on the clock there, they had dotted about 1 second remaining, and thinking of time as well. That's I think I'll wrap up there. So in summary, it's really important that you trust your team in a virtual environment. Trust them that you hired them in the first place, so trust them that they'll do their jobs. enable your team, empower them, make sure that they have the tools that they need, communicate really well and appropriately, and just manage that communication. And then create that sense of belonging, that they're part of something bigger than just the project that they're working on. So thank you, and happy to take any questions that people may have. Also, if you have any questions afterwards, we have an exhibitor booth in the exhibitors area, so please pop along afterwards there as well. Thank you.
Hi Stella, it's Mike. I am just putting some questions through to you here. We've had a question through from Thomas. Sorry, I'll start my video so it's not a disembodied voice. What project management tool did you use? So
currently we use a tool called Trello, which many of you probably are familiar with. So that allows us to upload documents, to have communications with the client. It's really easy to work with. And then we've integrated with their API. So we have that integrated with a backend Drupal 7 site currently, soon to be 8, but we have that integrated so we can build reporting and other things on that.
Okay, we have another question here. How do you manage scrums in large teams and keep them short and interesting?
So we don't actually do Scrum. So we do an agile, we do have an agile methodology that we use called Kanban. We wouldn't do a Scrum per se, but yeah, we would tend to, I find it difficult to do large Scrum calls with large groups of people. You do kind of need to keep them shorter, and yeah, that's all I can say on that. Like, we do tend to keep our teams relatively small, so probably 5 people on a team.
Okay, and I think you've been detailed enough so that there are no further questions at the moment.
Okay, well listen, if anybody does have any further questions, I'll be at the Anartech stand after this, so please pop by. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, hang on. We've got one that literally just popped in, a last second question. How do you manage your team if there are part-time employees or if some have current problems with childcare?
That is down to managing expectations. So as long as they can tell us when they're going to be around and let us know in advance, and it usually falls into some sort of pattern that they have childcare from this time every day, then when we know they're around, you know, that'd be perfect. And obviously things come up, but we work around that essentially. And we do that. We do have some people who are part-time and some people who definitely, like myself, have to go off and do childcare at certain points of the day. So it's just about knowing what the schedules are in advance and then working around that. Okay, thanks everyone. Leave it there. Bye.